guys, welcome back to another CXC review session. I'm your host, Ms. Bayakem. So today we'll be reviewing part 2 of the May-June 2017 CXC Biology past paper. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and also turn on your notifications so you know whenever we post a video. Let us begin. Question 31. The best description of the role of excretion in living organism is to... So guys, please remember, excretion is the removal of metabolic waste. So we have A, produce urine, B, produce feces, C, get rid of toxic waste, D, get rid of excess water. So now if we were to look at this and try to eliminate, we would realize that because excretion is removal of metabolic waste, urine will be out of it because excretion is not just the removal of urine, it's not just the removal of feces, and it's not just getting rid of excess water. But the best option, because we're talking about metabolic waste, talking about some form of waste, and metabolic means all the waste coming from the body, and as we should know, they are toxic waste, and C would have been the best option. 32. Which of the following is not a form of excretion in plants? So we have A, carbon dioxide diffusing in through the stomata, B, substances being stored in the bark of a tree, C, water vapor diffusing out through the epidermis, D, stored calcium oxalate crystals in leaves during leaf fall. So to get this answer, we can also use the process of elimination. So stored calcium oxalate crystals in leaf fall, so that is a form of excretion, so that's out of it. C, water vapor diffusing out through the epidermis, that is also a form of excretion. Then B, substances being stored in the bark of the tree, that is also a form of excretion. So the only one there that is not a form of excretion is A, which states carbon dioxide diffusing in through the stomata. So remember, carbon dioxide is a gas that is needed for photosynthesis to happen. And if it is coming in, remember, excretion is the getting rid of, so it's the removal rather of metabolic waste. So this sentence is not telling us that we're removing something, but something is coming in. So that's why it's not a form of excretion, all right? So that's A. Question 33. Which of the following correctly describes movements in plants? So this is a question that if you have been following all my videos, you would have met before. So we have A, irreversible whole movement, B, reversible whole movement, C, irreversible growth movement, D, reversible growth movement. So the answer definitely has to be C, because plant movement is irreversible and it is also growth movement. So it's irreversible growth movement, or maybe on some questions you may see irreversible growth or part movement. That is how plants move. So irreversible meaning that they cannot get back short, or they cannot get younger once they start to grow. That's why the change is irreversible. And then growth, because we all know that plants grow. All right. Question 34. Which of the following statements about the skeletal system is not correct? So we have A, it protects delicate organs such as the heart and lungs. B, it is made up of hard, non-living tissues. C, it produces red and white blood cells. D, it gives the body its shape. So this one, we can also eliminate to see what's the answer. So this is correct. The skeletal system does protect delicate organs. B, it does produce red and white blood cells. Well, rather C, it does produce red and white blood cells, so that's out of it. Then D, it gives the body its shape. Everybody should know that's definitely out of it. So the only thing that we're left with is B, it is made up of hard, non-living tissues. Even though the skeletal system is hard, guess what? It is not made up of non-living tissues. The tissues are living, and that's why we can grow and our cells can actually replicate, because the system has to be living for all of that to happen. Question 35. Item 35 refers to the following diagram. Which of the following muscle to bone attachment above is accurate? So we have to look at the diagram and then determine which muscle to bone attachment would be most suitable. So we have A, that is definitely out of it. Our muscle doesn't attach that far on the bone. B doesn't look too bad, but I would get rid of B because look at this attachment here. The muscle doesn't attach that far. Then, looking at C now, I would also eliminate C because the attachment is not here on this bone. It has to be on this bone, this one right here. And the attachment is not so far here, so I'm eliminating C also. So D, hopefully, yes, from one bone to the next. So D is looking correct. So please note, guys, these diagrams or these drawings are not drawn to scale. So you have to make the most accurate guess whenever you're doing a question like this. Also note that this muscle here, this fat one or this larger one, is the bicep, and then the longer muscle here is the tricep. All right. Question 36. Item 36 refers to the following diagram illustrating an experiment. After a few days, the tallest shoot would most likely be. So now we can actually look at the experiment. So we have we have a shoot, we have foil cap, then we have light. So you may know the foil cap as aluminum foil, foil paper, whatever you know it as, it's the same thing. In 2, we have the tip removed, we still have the light, and we still have the shoot. In 3, we have the shoot and the light, and that would mean that in 3, nothing was done with it. So it's the plant, nothing was done with it. All we did was place it under light. 4, we have the shoot, we have light, and we have a transparent cap. And transparent is similar to like a clear plastic bag, a clear poly bag, clear polythene bag. That's transparent. So now the question is, which one will go the tallest? So the answer has to be I with the foil cap, because the foil cap is dark, so it would provide a dark environment to the tip. Hence, the hormone auxin will accumulate under these dark regions, causing this plant to grow towards the sunlight. So it's going to elongate and then they're going to grow towards the sunlight because of auxin loves to gather in the dark region, and auxin is a growth hormone in plants. So I'll go with A, which is I. Question 37. Which of the following best describes the term stimulus and response? So we've been through this already. So the answer is definitely D. A stimulus is a detectable change in an organism's environment, and the response, an organism's reaction to stimulus. So we're on to question 38. Item 38 refers to the following diagram. Which of the following options correctly identify the structure labeled I, 2, and 3? So now if we look at the diagram, we would realize that I is the receptor 3 is gonna be the effector. So I'll put the E here for effector. So now we have to figure out what is happening at 2. So if we looking at this diagram, guys, we have to know what this is. But if you don't know what it is, you can actually go through your response to see what corresponds with I being the receptor or 3 being the effector. So we have I, the receptor. So the only two that has I starting with the receptor is A and D. And wow, they both end in with 3 being the effector. So we know we're on the right track for that part. So now we have to figure out if it's the relay nerve that is here or if it's the spinal nerve. So based on this diagram, we would have known that this is the spinal cord. So now it would definitely have to be the spinal nerve, which is D. Question 39. The smell of a hamburger being cooked causes Joan to salivate. Which of the following is the effector which brings about her response? So the first thing you have to know is that the effector is always a muscle or a gland. And to be honest, based on looking at this, the only thing here that is a gland is the salivary gland. So that's one way to look at it. So if you did not know that, you can actually eliminate based on what you know or what the definition you have in your head for the effector. So normally, the effector is what helps to bring about the movement or the response. So now the person is salivating. So what can help to bring about that response? So A, cell in the nose. So no, not necessarily. B, salivary gland. C, the smell of food. Not necessarily, because it would still relate back to the cells in the nose. And then D, secretion of saliva. So the secretion of saliva would definitely be our response. If they ask us what the response would have been, that would definitely be the answer. So now the salivary gland would cause the person to salivate, which is the production of saliva in the mouth because you smelled something good. So the answer is still B if you would approach it that way. Question 40. Items 40 refers to the following graph, which shows changes in the dry mass of an embryo and endosperm during germination. So the actual question. From the graph, it is true to say that, so let us look. A, the embryo begins to grow as the endosperm increases in mass. So the embryo begins to grow, yes. As the endosperm increases in mass, no, we can see that the endosperm is decreasing in mass. B, the embryo and the endosperm decrease in mass at the same time, or same rate rather, no, that doesn't happen. C, the embryo and the endosperm increase in mass at the same time. Embryo and the endosperm increase in mass, no, that does not happen. And then D, as the embryo grows, which is this, the food reserve is gradually depleted, and you wonder where they get this from, right? But guess what? Remember, the endosperm stores food for the plant to grow. So if the plant is growing, eventually the food reserve that is in the endosperm or the food that is in the endosperm are going to be depleted. So the answer is definitely D. 41. The best description of the disease AIDS is, so in the table we have causative agent, treatment, control, and prevention. So we have A, DNA virus, treatment, antigens, control, vaccination, prevention, public education. Then B, bacterium, antibiotics, monogamy, abstinence and condoms. C, RNA virus, antiretrovirals, monogamy, abstinence and condoms. Then D, bacterium, penicillin, vaccination, abstinence and condoms. So based on what you know about HIV and AIDS, you would have realized that C is the best option. And even if you don't know a lot, you could have realized that A is definitely out of it, because public education only is not going to stop HIV or AIDS rather from spreading. So we would have known that that is out. We would also know that D is out because vaccination is not how we control AIDS. So that's out. So we would have known that we're stuck between B and C. So we would know that the treatment is definitely not antibiotics. So that would have left us with C. So we would have known that it's RNA virus for the agent. Treatment is antiretrovirals. And to control it is monogamy, and we can prevent it by abstaining or using condoms. 42. Production of new organisms from one parent only is known as, so we have A, sexual reproduction, B, asexual reproduction, C, mitosis, D, meiosis. So the best possible answer is definitely asexual reproduction, which is B. 43. Which of the following forms of birth control is most likely 100% effective? So we have A, birth control pill, B, tubal ligation, C, diaphragm, D, condom. So the best possible answer is B, tubal ligation. 44. 44 refers to the following diagrams of flowers from two different types of plants. Which of the following statement is true for both flowers? So we have A, both are wind pollinated. No, that is not true. B, petals are absent from both I and II. That is not true. C, both are pollinated by hummingbird. Not true. D, I is pollinated by hummingbird and II is pollinated by wind. So the answer is definitely D. And I know this because if we look at this flower, we can see that it is pollinated by animals based on its structure, its design. While this one, we can see that it must be pollinated by wind based on its structure, as the anther are on the outside, so whenever the wind blows, it would move to a different plant and vice versa. 45. Fertilization normally occurs in the A, uterus, B, vagina, C, oviduct, D, ovaries. So the answer is definitely oviduct, which is C. Question 46. Items 46 to 47 refers to the following organisms. So we have A, host, B, vector, C, parasite, D, pathogen. In answering items 46 to 47, match the following description to one of the options above. Each option may be used once or more than once or not at all. 46. An organism which causes a disease. So that's definitely a pathogen. So that's D. Then 47, an animal which carries a disease-causing organism but is not adversely affected by it. So that is a vector, which is B. Question 48. Which of the following is not a consequence of plant or human disease? So we have A, food prices decrease, B, loss of productivity,
C, higher absenteeism from school. D, larger part of the national budget used to buy medication. So they're asking us which is not a consequence of a human or plant disease. So now with a question like this, elimination would have been the best option to use. So we have D, large part of the national budget used to buy medication. That would definitely be something that we need to do if, we have a human disease or a plant disease affecting the population. So now higher absenteeism from school, it also depends on the type of disease that is affecting the population. If we were thinking about COVID, then you could have seen that. So that's out of it also. Then loss of productivity. If we are still thinking about COVID, we could have seen that it is stopping productivity because a lot of persons are not working, and then a lot of stuff are not being produced. And then the next one, food prices decrease. So not necessarily, because we are using COVID here, as we can see with COVID, the food prices skyrocketed, they went up. So this definitely would not be a consequence of it. 49. Which of the following methods would be most appropriate for the treatment of chronic hypertension? Please remember that hypertension is high blood pressure. So which one of them would not be appropriate? So we have diet modification. All right, that would be 1. 2, exercise, and then vaccination. So as we can see, vaccination would have been out. A person with hypertension, they don't need a vaccination. All right, so the only thing that can help hypertension would have been the diet modification, that is the person's changing their diet and the person exercising, because hypertension is a lifestyle disease, meaning that you get this disease based on your lifestyle. Maybe you're not eating healthy and you're not exercising, and as a result you have hypertension, which is high blood pressure. So the answer is 2. Well, not 2, but I and 2 rather. So I and 2, which is A. All right. Then 50. Applying a thin layer of oil on the surface of an open pond can control the population of mosquitoes because A, mosquitoes cannot feed on an oily surface. B, a layer of oil makes it difficult for the larvae to obtain food. C, a layer of oil prevents the pupa from being able to obtain air. And then D, mosquitoes cannot fly if their wings are covered with a film of oil. So by reading these options, you would have known that D and also A is out of it. So now we're stuck with B and C. So we have B, a layer of oil makes it difficult for the larvae to obtain food. And then C, a layer of oil prevents the pupa from being able to obtain air. So we all know that mosquitoes can be destroyed by spraying oil on the surface of a stagnant water. So now the oil that is sprayed will reduce the surface tension of the water so that the larvae will sink and suffocate. So also the surface tension can no longer support the eggs, and thus the larvae or the pupae will die of starvation. So basically having the water there will prevent the larvae or the pupae from getting air, from obtaining air, and as a result they'll suffocate. So that's why the best option based on that would have been C. So a layer of oil prevents the pupa from being able to obtain air. So B would be out because they're talking about obtaining food, and that's not the reason.
51. On a certain Caribbean island where sugar cane is grown, a fungus is accidentally introduced into the island and it destroys the entire crop of sugar cane. Which of the following best describes what happened? So we have A, the plants were old and therefore more susceptible to fungus. B, the plants were not of a hardy enough variety to withstand the fungus. C, the plants were planted too close together so the fungus spread easily. And then D, there was no genetic variation among the plants, so none could survive the attack. So the best option is definitely D. 52. Which of the following statements best describe a chromosome? A, two forms of the same gene. B, structure made up of DNA wrapped around histones. C, nucleic acid that contains all the genetic information. D, part of the DNA which carries genetic information to produce a protein. So the answer is definitely B, structure made up of DNA wrapped around the histones.
Question 53. Which of the following is not a characteristic of meiosis? So guys, please remember that meiosis is a cell division in which only occurs in the reproductive organ during gamete formation. It also results in the formation of cells containing the haploid number, which is half the number of chromosomes that the parent cell would have. So now we're asking which of them is not a characteristic of meiosis, all right? So we know what meiosis is now, so we can actually go through the options. So we have A, maintenance of the diploid number. B, random assortment of genes. C, crossing over of chromosomes. D, genetic recombination of alleles. So if we were to eliminate, one of the things that should stand out to you is C, which is the crossing over of chromosome. And we all know that is one of the characteristics of meiosis, in which the crossing over is the swapping of genetic material that occurs in the germline or during the formation of eggs and sperm. So we know that would be out of it. So C is already out of it. So now the recombination of allele. This happens when there is an exchange of genetic material that is going to lead to difference in the organism, that is going to cause some difference in the organism. So that is also a characteristic of meiosis. Remember, all the offsprings are not similar, so that would also be out of it. So if we were to look at B now, random assortment of genes, this happens also in meiosis when the homologous chromosomes are divided into half to form their haploid. And this happens where there's a separation of genes. And it happens randomly, so nobody instigated the separation. And that's why this is also a characteristic of meiosis, because random assortment kind of goes back to crossing over. When the genes just cross, nobody dictates which genes is going to cross, but it just happens. So now the only one that would have been left would have been the maintenance of the diploid number. And if you remembered in my definition, you would have known that meiosis gives us the haploid number, half the number of chromosome as the parent, while the diploid number would have been the same number of chromosome as the parent. So anywhere you would have taken it, or any route, you would have realized that A should be out of it.
54. Tarzan and Jane, both of whom are heterozygous for blood group A and B respectively, can have offsprings that are likely to be. So we did this question in the 2016 CSEC Biology past paper. We also answered it in depth, so you can actually go over there and see the explanation. Question 55. Which of the following terms refer to visible characteristics of living things? So we have A, gene, B, genotype, C, phenotype, D, chromosome. So the answer is definitely phenotype. 56. Zane, the son of James and Jennifer, may have inherited the red-green color blindness gene from his parents. Neither James nor Jennifer is colorblind. So if N represents normal, what are the genotypes of the parents? So we also did this one in the 2016 CXC Biology class paper, so you can go there and see our explanation, but the answer is A. And just to give you a quick synopsis, it's A because, remember, males have X and Y chromosome, and if the male James is normal, it has to have a capital N. And if the female is normal, she also has to have a capital N. But for her son Zane to get color blindness, the color blindness allele must be on the mother because she has two X chromosomes. So that's why there's a small n, which would have represented the color blindness disease.
57. Which of the following describes the final stage of the process of meiosis? So we have A, separation of the sister chromatid, B, homologous chromosomes pair up, C, homologous chromosomes separate, D, crossing over of homologous chromosome. So just looking at this, I think everybody should have picked up that crossing over does not happen in the final stage. So that should be out. So I should have put an X here. I don't know why I draw a circle. So this is out because crossing over does not happen in the last stage or any of the final stages. It happens in the first stage. To be more specific, it happens in prophase, late prophase. So now C, homologous chromosomes separate. So that is close to the last phase, but is not exactly in the last phase. So this happens in anaphase, which is anaphase 1. So just to make sure, we can just leave it like that. So for B, homologous chromosomes pairs up. So everybody should know this is one of the first things that happens in meiosis. It happens in the first stage. It happens in mid-prophase. So this is out of it, definitely. So now we're stuck with A and C. So let us see what A is saying. So separation of the sister chromatids. And then C is the homologous chromosome separate. So the separation of the sister chromatids, guys, it happens in metaphase 2. So that's why I would eliminate this now, because this happens in anaphase 1. So remember, metaphase 2 comes after, that is in the last part of meiosis. So the separation of the sister chromatids, so they start to be sister chromatids from actually metaphase 2, but actually in anaphase 2 now, these chromatids will move to the opposite pole, which is the same thing as these chromatids separating. So that's why the answer is A. So 58. A species consists of members that, so please remember that a species is a group of organisms that can interbreed to produce a fertile offspring. So A, occupy the same habitat, B, reproduce by asexual means, C, interbreed under natural conditions, and D, interbreed to produce infertile offspring. So based on my definition, you would have already eliminated D, because I told you a species is a group of organisms that can interbreed to produce fertile offspring, but this is saying infertile, so this is wrong. Don't get confused, don't get mixed up. The next thing, can interbreed under normal condition, well, natural condition, then yes. B, reproduce by asexual means. So I am saying no to this because species don't only reproduce by asexual means, so this wouldn't be the best definition. And then A, occupy the same habitat. Not all species occupy the same habitat, and habitat means that, it's your house or their home. So not all species live the same place. Some live in different areas of the world or in the ecosystem. So this one is out. So the best appropriate meaning would have been C, interbreed under natural conditions. And natural condition means the environment that they're in. So nothing is affecting them, nothing man-made rather, or artificial is affecting them and causing them to produce offspring. So they're doing it under in nature's world rather.
Question 59. The theory of evolution is based on natural selection. Which of the following is not a feature of natural selection? So we have A, variation that can be passed to the next generation. B, an environment that does not change. C, overproduction of offspring. D, competition for limited food supplies. So now we have to remember what natural selection is, which is changes in members of a species over a period of time or over generations to create a different species. And when I say different, I mean a new species. So it's changes in members of a species over a period of time to create a new species. So now they're asking us which of the following is not a feature of natural selection. So we have A, variation that can be passed to the next generation. So that's a feature. All right, a variation has to do with changes. So these are changes that can be passed. All right. B, an environment that does not change. Thinking we can leave this for now. C, overproduction of an offspring. Leaving this one also. And then D, competition for limited food supply. So I would take this one out. Competition for, no, that won't be a good reason. So we are stuck between B and C, an environment that does not change. So I would definitely go with an environment that does not change, because for natural selection to happen, there have to be some form of changes in the environment, and these new species or these new organisms will try to adapt. So whatever species that was there before in that environment, because of changes in it, they will adapt and become a new species. So that's why B would have been the best option. So question 60, which of the following would be involved in the production of insulin by genetic engineering? So we have I, transfer of the human insulin gene to the bacterium. 2, a vector to transfer the insulin gene. 3, production of insulin by the bacterium. So please remember that genetic engineering involves altering or manipulating genes. For example, transferring genes from one organism into another by rapidly dividing organisms such as bacteria. So now, if we were to identify which one of these processes are involved in genetic engineering, we have to analyze the meaning. So it's basically putting a gene which have a desired characteristic into another organism, mainly a bacteria. And remember, bacteria are small organisms, and guess what? They multiply in numbers fast. And as a result, we'll get a lot of that desired characteristic that was inserted in one of those bacteria. So understanding this, so now I transfer the human insulin gene into a bacterium. Yes, because they want us to produce insulin, guys. 2, a vector to transfer the insulin gene. So, and then 3, production of the insulin gene by the bacterium. So we definitely know that 3 is in there, because if we're putting the gene inside the bacteria, and I just told you that the bacteria will multiply, and that desired gene will be multiplied also in the bacteria. So hence we will get the insulin gene being produced. And also 2 is definitely in it, because a vector is needed to transfer that insulin gene. So I'll go with D, which is all of them. Alright guys, so we're at the end of another CXC revision video. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and also hit that notification button so you know whenever we post a video. See you next time when we try to review the 2017 CXC HSB past paper.